Welcome to the Fireside Chat. The Fireside Chat is a discussion on anything Gridcoin, hosted here in the Gridcoin Discord server every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 12 a.m. UTC, hosted by myself, Jay Ringo, our friend, the Goblin Popper over there with his bunny.
Hello.
And I like chocolate.
Hey.
And we are here this week discussing the economics and incentive structures of Gridcoin and the recent CBR proposal, which stands for Constant Block Reward. So CBR, let's just jump right into that. CBR is basically the idea that every time you stake a block, you get a reward, a set reward from the protocol. We currently operate with a % interest where you stake a block and you receive the interest earned by the coins. So in other words, you stake a block and you don't receive a reward for staking the block. You get a different type of reward. So the goal with CBR, we're going to be doing this very briefly. The main discussion is going to be this Saturday at 7 p.m. UTC here in the Gridcoin Discord during the Gridcoin Hangout hosted by Rhino, who's also joining us. Hey, Rhino, if you have mic, say hi. So he says hi in the chat. The goal of CBR is a very lengthy proposal. We spent a lot of time working out the math and all the work that was put into it. Not all of it, but some of it is outlined in the proposal, so you can follow our thought process and see how we came up with the values that we came up with. But the primary goal of switching to CBR is to get people to bring coins online to help secure the network, because that is what we are. We are a blockchain network, and without blockchain security, we don't exist. We can't reward people for contributing their idle processing potential to Boink projects. So the thinking is, if you actually get a reward for staking a block, you are going to leave your coins online to compete for staking blocks, and it's expected that this will shoot the difficulty up fairly high as people with large balances bring their balances online to compete for these blocks. I don't have the stats in front of me, but you can look them up on the State of the Network reports, and the I'll guess about it, but the average difficulty for the past couple weeks has been around 1, between 1 and 3, I will say, sometimes below 1. Barton here says the average difficulty for the last 7 days is 4.1, but that is actually very high.
Yeah, so it got up to like 5.2 today. Oh, it jumped to 17.
Gee.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, I saw it when it was like 5 or like 3, and I kept turning around, and over about 25 minutes or so, it jumped to 5.2. I didn't see it hit 15, but yeah, that's, yeah.
So that's just an example of what we expect to happen. I would guess that this is happening. Well, first I'll finish the summary really, really quick. So we expect difficulty to jump from about 1 to somewhere between 10 and 20, which will just give us greater blockchain stability, more security. It'll be harder to perform attacks, and forks will be a little less dramatic, if anyone remembers the recent forkopolis. But yeah, so you can already see the effect. I think the jumps right now are a direct effect of CBR going to be implemented in the coming months, mainly because I think whales are coming on to get the interest that is owed to them over the past couple of years. So we're seeing an example of how much people are going to be coming on. So that is the basic rundown of CBR, and it basically, we're changing the incentive structure of Gridcoin to incentivize competition for staking blocks.
So has this been confirmed, or is this a general discussion that it's currently being reviewed?
CBR, implementing CBR?
Yeah, has that been like approved, or is it currently being voted on? I'm sorry.
It has been approved several times.
Oh, okay.
It's had a history to it. It's like the blockchain has had a low weight for a while, and it's always been seen to be a problem and something we want to fix eventually. And CBR was the solution proposed a while ago. But Now, after Forkopolis, there's a lot of pressure to really get it fixed. So if there's another protocol issue, again, we will have a little more blockchain security during. So the protocol itself, the idea of CBR was approved through, I think, 2 votes. And then this current proposal is an attempt to come to consensus on what the block reward will be for staking a block. So instead of just pulling a random number out of the air, we did a lot of work. Actually, Jim is here. He did a lot of the math and the code scraping to try and figure out what is going to happen and how what values are going to be presented. So it's one of the bigger protocol changes since I've been active in the community. So I'm pretty excited for it.
So I don't want to get too technical, but regarding the protocol change, since this will be a protocol change to the actual blockchain, I'm assuming that doesn't really require too much of or any update on the user's part. So this will be instantly adopted, correct?
No. This is going to be a mandatory update. So this is going to be tested on the testnet, which Barton will actually be talking about next week during the Fireside Chat. And it will, when it gets implemented, it'll be posted everywhere. You'll be encouraged to update as soon as possible, and exchanges will have to update as well. So I know a lot of exchanges just came back online, but they will go down hopefully for just like a day or two as they update, but then come back. And this, again, the poll is 8 weeks long, and then the proposal says we're going to test it on testnet for at least a month, a minimum of a month, which means the testing could go on for 2, 3, 4 months, depending on really what issues come up. But it is going to be mandatory, and everyone will have to update.
Gotcha.
Yeah, one of the biggest issues we've had that we've talked about in the economics Slack channel is we really just don't know at the end of the day what the response of whales is going to be to the CBR approach. And it's really guesswork. It's an economic response problem. It's partially perceptual and not necessarily rational in nature. And this I'm sure economists in this group could probably opine at length on how that works. But the issue is there's a large degree of uncertainty in exactly how many coins are going to be staking once CBR goes into place. We do believe that the difficulty is going to go way up. Where exactly how high it goes, we really don't know. And this has been the subject. I hate to frame it this way, a lot of hand wringing in the economics discussions, because of course the worry is what that does to the small balance folks. The time to stake problem for small balance holders is really aggravated by high difficulty. So you're really balancing 2 things that are in tension with one another here, which is the desire to make sure that people that are small balance holders but are doing research can get rewarded in a reasonable amount of time, but we also have to have the network secured properly. And given that the proof of research, really research is an incentive award. It's not used to secure the blockchain anymore. It's a proof of stake blockchain. So those 2 things are in tension with one another now. And this is trying to walk the line to basically balance those two needs. It's a very tough thing. And one of the things that we think this is going to do, it's going to put pressure to come up with a reward mechanism that people don't have to wait until they stake to necessarily get their research rewards. So it's quite a bit of interesting things that come into play when we do CBR. But I think the overall the consensus of all the people that have been working on this are that if we don't do CBR, we're going to be continually left with the situation where we have giant whales and other folks that have high balances that basically only bring their wallets on 4 times a year to collect their interest. And that's just really not the way the network needs to operate. So
it plays with the incentives. It changes. We'll talk about manual rewards claims maybe a little bit later. But it plays with the incentives. So we as a blockchain incentivize people to contribute research, and then that's more or less it. You're incentivized to stake blocks on the chain so you can receive your earned research rewards. But now we're going to be incentivizing almost two groups of people. And you say they sort of work in tension, and I see that, but it could also be framed in that they work together, because you have the researchers who are incentivized by the research mint, the number of coins that are given for contributing to Blink, and then you have the blockchain, which is now going to incentivize people to stake blocks. And you're going to have two different sort of, yes, intention, but also reliant on each other, two different incentive structures, two different groups of people working together for a common cause, but also working separately and able to come at problems with different perspectives, maybe, instead of, like you said, having just having people hold a balance offline and then be like, oh, I forgot to get my interest for Gridcoin this year. I guess I'll log on for 10 minutes, own the blockchain, and then disappear. Like, no, it brings them into the whole ecosystem, which is going to be pretty cool.
I actually agree with that. I mean, I think the other thing too is there are a number of mid-range folks like me, for example, that have a pretty moderate size balance and stake pretty often, but also do a lot of research work. So I think it's also probably a bit of a oversimplification to say it's polarized on one side or the other. There are a number of people that actually do both too, and I think all those folks are contributing to this. The other thing I'll comment too, maybe this is a little bit out of turn, but I'm actually pretty enthused by the initial response to the poll, because I think people are picking a reasonable choice so far, at least what I saw in the poll response, in terms of the CBR that people split that people seem to be favoring, which tells you that you don't have some folks going off the deep end in terms of what they want. I don't know whether you want to comment on that or not.
Yeah, I'll summarize what you're talking about really quick. So the way we set up the poll was, instead of just saying vote for a block reward of 5, 10, 15, or 20, we dove into the economics, and we acknowledged that we are a unique blockchain that rewards people for two separate things. Bitcoin came out and it incentivized people to stake blocks to solve these hashes so that the blockchain would continue running, because it costs resources to solve this hash. It costs a lot of computing power. So we, as a proof of stake currency, reward people for securing the blockchain, and then also for directing computing power at scientific projects, more or less BOINC projects. So we recognized that we do that, and we decided to explore the economy as that. So how many coins do we want to mint for people securing the blockchain, and how many coins do we want to mint for people doing research? And so we split it up. We said Gridcoin mints 100% of the GRC a year, and we presented 5 options. We're going to send 85% of that GRC to researchers and 15 to stakers, and then we just went down in increments of 5 down to 65% to researchers and 35 for stakers. And the split that people are choosing is 75% for research and 25% for staking. So it's an acknowledgement that securing the blockchain is valuable, but we are a science blockchain. We're here to reward research. So it's I agree with you. I think it's a pretty fair split. It's pretty even. But the poll is still young. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I will say I kind of do agree with the 75-25. I probably would have pushed more for like a 80-20, but I mean, it's a decent compromise, right? But what I would say is, like, I mean, my mining equipment that I'm using is like a Raspberry Pi, right? I'm getting about like 3/4 of a GRC a day. It's not much, but it does do some actual like work. And so the fact that but I do always leave one of my Pis on with a wallet. Always. It is on 24 hours a day, every day, staking and like securing the blockchain. So in a way, I do like the shift towards like providing stakers with a little bit more, because I feel like even with my minimal hardware, I still can provide something, um, and it does give me some more incentive, even though my wallet is pretty small, right? And I think that is a point that I feel like comes up with most conversations around GRC is what small balances mean for some people in the community, and that's a bit of a rabbit hole to kind of go down.
Ha 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 ha.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah. But yeah, so I feel like it's a bit of a rabbit hole to go down that. But it's do we have any numbers regarding the distribution of GRC across wallets? Like, what is like 90% of the users hold this much, and so on and so forth.
Barton, you want to talk about that?
Let me pull up the data right now. Hold on.
Because we are a blockchain, which is just another word for an open ledger secured by cryptography, we of course have that information. You can just go read the ledger and see what addresses own what. The only problem is you can't see which addresses are owned by the same individual, but you can do it based on address.
Okay, yeah. So I'm more or less wondering for like if we have like a bell curve where we can say like, okay, percentage wise, how many wallets own how much of the GRC. And I'm wondering what that is.
So I'm reading this off Gridcoin stats. So the top 10 addresses hold 21.71% or 88.65 million Gridcoins. 11 through 100 hold 41.14% or 167.955 million Gridcoins. And everyone else holds 37.14% or 151.64 million.
So my question,
63%.
What was that?
So in other words, the top 100 addresses hold 63% of the Gridcoin, and that includes the foundation wallet, the founders wallets, and the burn wallet.
So, okay, so obviously the founders wallet, right? And the general funds wallet will be staking at all times, right? Because that's kind of important that they try. And yeah, why? It doesn't make sense if it didn't. But more importantly, so that's good to know the distribution. But also more importantly, do we have a statistic regarding okay, so 45% of wallets have between this value and this value, right? Do we have any statistics on that?
There's no way for the chain to know that because the chain only knows the addresses. The chain does not know the wallet that contains those addresses. Your wallet,
Yes.
Yeah, your wallet is just a collection of addresses. To the chain, it makes no difference. So there's really no way to collect that data short of using a database like Gridcoin Stats to just aggregate all the data and make connections.
Okay. Yeah. No. Okay. So I was just wondering because when you look at things like the staking and when we're about to encourage a significant amount of people to come on, I mean, 88 million. I think someone said we hit 17 difficulty today, which was about 44 million. So if the top 10% are staking, it's going to hit something close to 35 difficulty. And then if we go, sorry, I might have that math wrong, so feel free to correct me.
Yeah, it's not quite that linear. So difficulty is kind of like a moving average. It's based on a time frame. So difficulty has a tendency to react in wild ways. Like if there's a certain amount of net weight and then a lot of net weight comes on, it'll kind of go really high and then spike back to correct itself and kind of even out over time. So Jim can talk about this because he knows all the math involved. But generally what we were expecting is with CBR, it's a reasonable estimate to assume that difficulty will be somewhere between 10 and 20.
Okay. So, do you think there's any disincentive for very small holders if you assume that the top 10%, or let's 90% of the top 10%, so out of the top 10%, you see the top 9%, right, or whatever, coming on and staking, and another decent amount of the middle, right? You see a significant amount of people staking. Do you think that disincentivizes anyone with a very small balance due to the fact that someone with 2,000, 3,000, might not stake outside of every, like, how many days or weeks even.
You're discussing the centralization problem that this might cause. So CBR is going to make it so that difficulty goes up because people with large balances are going to come on, just as you're saying. And when that happens, it makes competition for blocks much more intense, much higher, so that those with smaller balances find it much more difficult to stake. Which another way to say that is the creation of blocks is going to be centralized in the hands of those with large wallets. So
Yes. No, that was it.
I think short answer is yes, it's going to do that, but the question is to what extreme? I don't think it's going to be a terrible extreme, but it could be a lot compared to what we have right now because of what the charlatan was talking about a little bit earlier. The system we have right now incentivizes researchers to stake for free because that's how they earn their earned research rewards. So it's kind of a unique incentive structure for staking because it says, look, you put all this effort into researching, but you also need to keep your wallet on at all times in order to earn your rewards, which I think at principle is okay. But what that does is it allows people with large balances just to sit back and do nothing and make profit, which is a little awkward. So we're no longer going to, it's not like the low balance users are disincentivized to stake. They're still incentivized to stake if they stake a block. If you have 1,000 GRC and 1% of 1.5% of 1,000 is what?
Was it like 10, like 15 or something?
15. So 1% of it. So if you have 1,000 GRC, you would make 15 GRC in 1 year, just from your APR. That means if you stake twice and if we end up going with the 75-25 split, which is a 10 block reward, 10 GRC block reward, then you just need to stake twice in a year to earn more Gridcoin than you would have in the other system, in the APR system. So you're still incentivized to compete for blocks, but with 1,000 GRC in the current system, you'll probably stake a couple times a year, but you'll still only get 15 Gridcoin at the end of the year. Does that make sense? So you're not like...
No, it definitely makes sense, right? Like, I mean, you're getting a much bigger reward. And I more or less just want to talk about this. I'm not saying this is not the correct way. I'm not arguing it shouldn't happen. I more or less just want to talk about these things because I know that these specific comments are going to be on the small users' minds. Like, right? Like, I only have like, around like 15,000 GRC, right? Like, it's not a very large wallet. Comparatively to what a lot of people I hear, but it's like I know people who have much smaller wallets who are like, 500 or even less, like people who have been just kind of mining and getting a couple hundred, if that. And I know that this is going to be a question that they ask as to, okay, when am I going to stake? How often am I going to stake? What kind of can I expect? What kind of return can I expect?
Yep.
And I just want to make sure we discuss that so that this podcast at the very least has that discussion and answers to that.
So there's a really easy, there's a lot of math that's been just in different things, and I just rewrote and got merged in the rewrite of the estimated time to stake stuff, and so I've been deep in the annals of math in this thing. I feel like my head's spinning, but I came up with an easy thumb rule to remember. Hotbit's probably got even some better stuff but there's a really easy thumb rule to remember that I probably ought to talk about here so that people remember it. It's a good thumb rule for estimated time to stake. I should say expected because it really is the expected value in math. The expected time to stake is roughly 10,000 divided by your balance, so that ratio. So do that division and then multiply it times the difficulty. And that's the amount of time that is expected to take to stake in days. Now, that thumb rule ignores the effect of UTXO your cooldown factors and all, the 16-hour cooldown you have for unspent transaction outputs. But, for most people that are small balance holders, the UTXO aspect of this is basically irrelevant, right? It doesn't mean anything. The UTXO problem really only comes to bear on the other end of the spectrum, which is people with high balances that want to have high staking frequency. They need to split their wallet into a number of UTXOs. But for the folks that are not staking very often or have low balances, the question really is, when am I ever going to see my reward?
Absolutely.
If you can very easily, so if you back solve that formula, so you have 10,000 divided by the balance as a ratio, then times difficulty equals the days, the estimated time to stake. So if you guys know that, of course, your rewards drop off after 180 days, right? So put in 180 days as the result of the formula and back solve for the balance using, say, a difficulty of 10. And what you're going to come up with is that you need about a minimum of about just like 550 Gridcoin to stake within 180 days at a difficulty of 10. And quite frankly, you should probably be, safely quite a bit more than that to make sure that you don't lose rewards. So, look, this is the folks that have, a wallet maybe of 100 Gridcoins are going to be in trouble from a research reward perspective if the difficulty, goes to 10 or 20. It's no doubt about it. They're not going to stake most likely in time to prevent some of their rewards from literally dropping off the end. And it is a concern, but we've also got to balance this with the network security problem too. So
correct me if I'm wrong, but that TTS, is that the likelihood, the 50% likelihood to stake that amount of time, or is that actual?
It's actually the closer to like 63%. So the 50% likelihood is the median in a geometric distribution, whereas the expected time to stake, which is really, if you roll a dice that has probability P of success, the expected value, in other words, the number of throws is the reciprocal of the probability. This is 1 over P. The confidence level of that expected value as P gets very small, meaning you have a large number of throws to build up the probability, approaches the ratio. It's a weird ratio. It's 1 minus 1 over E, which is the natural number E, which is about 63%. It sounds pretty close to the old standard deviation interval of 68%. It's not exactly the same number, but it's a good way to remember it. So, a 50% probability number is actually lower than the expected time to stake. And then what we're using in my new calculations, I'm actually using a number that's slightly higher than that. I'm using an 80% confidence level, which is a bit longer. And, that's always a compromise because, you always get people saying, well, the thing said I should see something by now and I haven't seen it, because probability is just really hard for folks to understand. And, they view it as like, well, this should be able to tell me exactly when I'm going to stake, and that's just not the way probability works. And so, you're trying to pick a confidence number that makes sense, that prevents people from complaining because they haven't seen their stake yet, and it's already well past when the estimate said, versus, putting a very high confidence level out there at like 99%, and then the estimated time to stake says it's going to be a year for a 1,000 Gridcoin wallet, when in reality you're going to get the chances of you having to wait a year are very, very small with a wallet that size. So these are always difficult questions as to exactly what confidence level to pick, but the expected level, which is the mean, not median, is about 63% confidence. We've had some, if you recall, we've had some discussions talking about other confidence factors, and who knows, as we gain experience with the new algorithm I just put in place, we may decide to change it in the future if it's people feel like it's putting numbers out there too long, or vice versa if it's too short.
Absolutely. We are doing this heuristically. We are not Cardano. We do not have the funds to develop 50 pages of math to really break this stuff down. But the root question, Goblin, you were talking about was the low balance users, right? So Jim just gave us the formula on how to figure out the balance you need. How to figure out the balance you need to stake within 6 months. It's 100 equals 10,000 divided by balance. That as a ratio times 10, and then you solve for balance. It turns out to be about 550, and then to be safe, you probably want a little more. So let's say 750 just for now. So the question is, do we keep the reason why you want to stake as a low balance user beyond just earning these block rewards is because Gridcoin is unique in that we incentivize people to stake blocks and also crunch BOINC projects. We need a way for the computer code for the protocol to get the research rewards from what's called the neural net into the user's wallet. So the way it currently does that is every time you stake a block, the coins move from your research savings account, what's called your RSA, into your wallet. So in other words, you must stake a block every 6 months to receive your earned research rewards. Because every time you stake a block, you earn your earned research rewards, and your beacon expires after 6 months. And if your beacon expires with Gridcoin in the RSA, it disappears. So the question is, how do we ensure that that doesn't happen to people if the difficulty when the difficulty shoots up to between 10 or 20, or maybe even more? And that is the question. And there are a couple proposals out there. I just wrote an article on something called manual reward claims. People have talked about super block rewards. The charlatan just said he does not support manual reward claims. So I can't wait to hear why from him. But that is the next problem we have to solve with CBR, because people were already concerned about having to stake a block to get their ERR before CBR. And now we're about to make it even harder to stake a block, so they're going to be even more concerned. And we don't want to exacerbate the problem. We want to solve the problem. So we will have to talk about that moving forward.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure that, I mean, whales are great, right? Like they have a lot of the funds, right? And you want them to definitely stake. And I don't want to disincentivize them to not, right? I just want to make sure that proportionally, the smaller users understand that they were taken into account, because a lot of times when you go on Reddit or you go on some of the platforms, a lot of them that aren't necessarily very involved, but do crunch and are avid GRC and boinkers, right? They don't necessarily understand what's going on with some of the updates. And that's not to say that they don't have access to it, and that's not to say that they couldn't find out. A lot of them just don't, and are like, oh, okay, they're changing it. But I just want to make sure that we address the fact that it's like, yeah, no, I mean, some of the people who develop have, quote, small wallets or smaller wallets, and a lot of the people that contribute and are part of the conversations have smaller wallets. So it's we're doing this for a very specific reason, and we think that even if it changes how you stake, or even possibly reduces, or even possibly increases how often you stake, we're doing it for the health of the network, right? Not necessarily for any other reason. And I do actually have one other question for Jim, or anyone who can answer it.
Before you ask that, can I just speak to that really quick? Because
yeah, sure. Yeah.
That's a really good point. We are not developers like a lot of these other ICOs. We're not 6 people who have reserved a bunch of coins for us to draw off of as we develop stuff to help ourselves. We are very open source. We have people who have very low balances who just want to help because they love science and they love what we can do here. We have people with very high balances who have been invested in this coin for 5 years now and want to make sure that things move along smoothly. So we're a group of people working for a common cause, not 6 or 7 people who released a token or a coin for profit. So that just 2 people who might question why we put stuff out. Most of the time, probably all the time, it's for the betterment of the network, for either science or the blockchain itself.
Yeah, and oftentimes the reason that I feel like a lot of the guys who assist with the development have large wallets, it's usually just the result of the fact that they've been around for a very long time, right? It's not because they're doing anything to incentivize themselves or they're building it for themselves. It's really just the fact that they've just been here for a long time. But anyway, but my question actually simply is, in the new system, will the coins also have a cooldown period of the 16 hours, or is that going away?
No, it's not going away.
Okay.
And in fact, there are aspects of the blockchain security that really require that cooldown to be in place. The cooldown is much shorter on testnet. I think it's an hour on testnet, which makes it a lot easier to do certain types of tests. But due to certain types of attacks that can be done against the network in this type of proof of stake system that we use, it's important to have a cooldown for those coins that have staked. So look, the folks that do have high balances and are going to stake a lot are going to have to worry about the UTXO granularity issue. That's not going to go away, and people are going to have to worry about that. But really, for the vast majority of folks, exactly how many UTXOs they have is really a secondary concern. I mean, look, if you're a moderate balanced person, you've got 10,000 Gridcoin, and you're say it's a difficulty of 5, you're going to be staking every 5 days. A 16-hour cooldown, you could get away with 1 UTXO. You don't need several. So, the cooldown issue really for a lot of folks is not a primary concern. But yeah, we still have to have that cooldown.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to ask because, I mean, I feel like if anything, in a situation where you're fighting over stakes, right? I feel like the cooldown is one of the things that would protect a lot of the smaller users because, of course, the whales are going to stake almost instantly, right? And they all stake, but if it's 16 hours and we stake every, I forget how many minutes, right? Then it leads it to like all the whales stake, and then in the same 16 hours, all the whales' coins are not old enough to stake, right? So you have people with smaller balances being able to do that. So I mean, I see it as a necessity. So
no, that's right. So one way to think about this, if you had a whale with an infinite balance, right? So that basically they're the only ones staking. Then their staking frequency is the inverse of the number of UTXOs they have. So for example, if they had 16 UTXOs, each UTXO has a 16-hour cooldown, so they can only stake 16 times a day, even if they were only the only one on the network. So, in reality, the frequency of the whales staking is going to be highly dependent upon how much trouble they're going to go to split their wallet up into more fine-grained UTXOs. Most likely, this is a practical matter that they're probably not going to fully optimize their UTXO granularity to try and maximize it. So my guess is the whales are actually going to understake from their perfect frequency, meaning that they're not going to be staking it the same rate that you would theoretically think they would if we didn't have the cooldown. And by the way, that is going to have a good effect in terms of providing some space for the smaller balance holders to actually get in there and stake. That's the way it'll work.
Absolutely. And it's like, I don't think that many balance holders with over, I would just say, 1 million USC, large balance holders probably aren't going to bring their entire balances online, just because it is, I mean, there's risk involved, there's computing resources involved, and there's management resources that are involved. We're changing it from idle APR to a task to actually earn Gridcoin. You can't just sit and earn it. You can't just sit on the couch and let other people do the work for you. You have to participate in some way. So it costs a little bit, whatever it is. So you might have a small amount in a cold wallet, or have stuff just off the network, and then bring on other balances to stake. So that'll just add to what Jim was just saying about whales not staking at the optimal level that we expect them theoretically to stake.
Yeah, and I just noticed on the text, Emma and Maddie asked a question about several wallets, and then Burton answered a question about, the wallets and UTXOs are somewhat independent, meaning that you can have as many UTXOs pretty much as you want in one wallet, and you can also split, your balance among many wallets. So I think what Jay Ringo is talking about is the division of balances among wallets is largely a security concern for whales, whereas the UTXO granularity is a question of optimization. And by the way, it's also a pain in the rear to have to go through and send money to yourself to create UTXOs. I mean, it's scriptable, so it's not incredibly difficult, but you also have to make sure they stay balanced and all this other kind of stuff. It's I think in practice we're not gonna see the large balance holders necessarily going through and perfecting their UTXO count so they maximize their staking frequency. They're going to do a good enough job to make sure that they're making a reasonable reward, and I think that's going to provide some space for the smaller and mid-range balance holders to get in there and stake while the UTXOs and the large wallets are on cooldown. Exactly how granular folks are going to get, who knows? But again, that's another one of those things where we're sort of guessing about the response of the large wallet holders. But I think at the end of the day, Ringo's right. We have to do this in a way to secure the network, and we have to get past the days where we're running at a difficulty of 0.35, 0.40, which is very dangerous for everybody. The least little problem occurs on the network with a difficulty that low, it can cause real issues, and that's a community-wide problem. So this is going to get that difficulty up there. It has some side effects, but I think at the end of the day, it's the far better of the options we have available.
Is there a target difficulty that we want to hit? Do we want to sit around 2 or 3? Like what would you say is a healthy number?
So that's an interesting question. So there's another formula that you may have seen that the effective number of, and I don't take, this was originally developed by Huptiwup, I think, SK Sen, came up with this formula a while back when the V8 protocol was first discussed, and I redeveloped it. I came across the same number as part of my math work. But essentially the number of active coins estimated staking on the network is about 10 million times the difficulty. It's actually not quite 10 million. It's like 9544917 or something. It's right. Just remember 10 million. It's close enough. So, think about that. At a difficulty of about 4, you've got, 40 million or so coins staking on the network. What's the total number of coins in circulation? It's over 400 million, right? But some of those are burned. So really, not all 400 million can actually be online. So if you think about it, probably a reasonable upper limit for what you could probably see online would be 300 million. So the maximum difficulty we could possibly really have would be 30, right? So that's kind of an upper limit.
So if all coins were staking, we would have about 30 after it did a moving average and kind of adjusted, right?
I think so. If accounting for coins that just are gone, burned, whatever, and I don't know if we could ever figure out exactly how many coins are not available. But I think it's unlikely to expect that all of the available coins are going to come online and stake, even with the CBR. I just don't think that's a reasonable response. And that's why as we thought about this, we thought maybe it's probably going to settle out somewhere between a third and a half of the maximum practical value, which would be somewhere between 10 and 15, maybe 20 maximum. That's kind of, do we need that level of difficulty? I don't think we need a difficulty of 10 or more to secure the network. That's for some people more experienced than I am with blockchain security to talk about. But we certainly need stuff more than 0.5. Yeah, which is, we've had days where we're literally hanging out in less than one, significantly less than one, which is difficult.
I think there's like 4 of us online or something at that point.
Yeah.
It'll be nice to be over 5, and we'll be significantly over 5. So it's gonna be nice, and people will see that, and it'll lend a little bit more credibility to us as a blockchain community when people look at exchanges like it, because it means that they're not going to have to close the wallet if there's a fork, or less likely to, because they don't need to deal with all that stuff.
Yeah,
So
I think
good
for the
images.
exchanges, probably this I'm predicting, but we had gotten where we were having some problems with forks where they were asking for, like, I think one of the exchanges was asking for 999 confirmations before they would
right.
confirm. I think it was Poloniex that was doing that. I don't think I think Bittrex was like 100 or something. But the good thing about this is once they realize the network is really stable, they'll back that down to a more reasonable value, right? Which is actually very helpful.
Or if it is stable and they just keep it at that value, it's much more realistic for us to hit, right?
Yeah, and at least you're going to get your coins, or whoever you're sending your coins to is going to get their coins, right? It's not going off into some fork somewhere that, who knows whether they get it or not. So.
Okay. No, I feel like I definitely pulled that down a little bit of an aside, but I did want to make sure that some of that was covered, or at least documented or spoken about somewhere for people to access.
Absolutely. This will be edited and uploaded by December 2023.
Just in time for the release of the actual patch. Got it.
Right. No, it should be up by Monday.
Chocolate over here.
I want to make one more comment too. I mean, just making a further comment to what Jay Ringo said. I feel like the folks that have been, working this have really tried to bend over backwards to be really as transparent as we can about our thinking and involve the community. I mean, the write-up around the CBR options, the poll was, I mean, it was an extensive read. There's a lot of information in there, and some of it may be a tough go for those that are not involved, but we're erring on the side of more detail rather than less, because we're trying to be transparent and involve everybody in the decision-making process. And I feel like that's the right way to go. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a community-based decision process, and we need the collective views and opinions of all different folks that are involved in Gridcoin to make sure we're doing the right thing. And I think that's true of also the development staff. Ringo said it right, but they don't live in a bubble. And I think this coin, unlike some of the others, it really is a community where the folks that are charged with developing and guiding the coin are really engaged in the community, and not just off on in some dark room somewhere doing stuff where nobody knows about it. So
that sounds way creepier than I thought you.
You can get pretty creepy in some of these. Oh, absolutely. And a lot of developers do come through the Hangouts on Saturdays. I know Broad's there a lot of the time. Chiraka comes through every once in a while. So everyone should come and check that out. It will be interesting to hear their feedback to it as well. And to what Jim was just saying, if you are here listening to this because you want to understand the nitty gritty of like the middle part of the proposal, understand that you don't need to understand that part fully. That is there exactly for what Jim just said, to give transparency to our thought process. The basic part of the proposal is the overview and the validation section. So if you understand those parts and you don't want to go deeper, that's fine. That's all you need to get. If you want to understand our thought process, look at the middle section, the rationale section, and where it talks about the current economics versus the proposed economics. We break down inflation rates a little bit. And if you don't get it still and you want to learn more, then come into the Slack, come into the Discord. We just don't have enough time in these to really get into that sort of detail in just an hour. So we would love for you to come and ask questions to us. We'll just type out the answers to you instead of, I'll come on Discord and talk to you, I guess, but these are here for the face value sort of stuff.
One other, yeah, I guess.
I guess if I have to, yeah.
The
No, I would love to come on and talk to you guys. I do meet some people on the radio channel every once in a while, but it is a lot of fun meeting people from the community.
yeah, no, I love talking, right? I'm at my computer pretty much throughout the entire day, and because I work from home, right? So I'm available to sit and talk. I what I know is from what I picked up from Barton and Jim and some of the other guys from various channels. So I'm not an authority, but I can definitely like say something, right? But one other thing is, I think it's also important regarding that massive of an update, right? There's one other thing that we need to make sure before it really goes live, and that's that the documentation and educational links are all fully updated with how staking works, right? Because the number of historical Reddit posts that talk about how to get stakes and how staking works and all that is gonna probably confuse a lot of people as soon as this comes out. So I feel like I mean, are the links ready? Do we have documentation or comments ready to be pretty much placed in there?
That's a good point. I don't think we've even thought about that yet.
Yeah, so like that,
No,
like even if it's just like a pre-written paragraph in a Word doc somewhere on someone's computer, it needs to be like ready to go live as soon as that patch is also live. Right?
Well, to be fair, the actual process of staking is not changing at all.
No, but when
The only
people
thing
say,
is
hey,
changing it.
like, how am I earning this? Or hey, I got 10. I've read a post that said something about like I should expect like 1. And yeah, I'm not saying. Okay, so we're 2 or 3 months out, so I'm not saying it needs to be done like now. I'm just saying.
Well, it should be started now.
Yeah, well, yeah, yes, right. Like that should be look to be updated, and those resources need to make sure that they're ready to go, and ready to be put out there as soon as the patch is live. But I always like to think about the new user and the small user, right? Because I think numbers wise, you have a lot more people who are in the small and new user group, and those are the people that, while they're probably not necessarily contributing much, they're the people who are also kind of telling their friends, hey, yeah, I found out about Gridcoin and I think this is really cool. And I mean, that's what I did. My friends were doing folding at home, and some of them kind of hate me because I never shut up about GRC, some like half the time, and they used to do folding at home, and now they just kind of some of them do GRC on the side, right? And so I feel like that's the best way to make sure that you continue to grow, is also to make sure that smaller and new users are taken care of. And a big part of that is making sure the educational resources and the links are all up to date with the proper documentation.
Absolutely.
This has definitely gone down a lot of different tangents, and I apologize.
That's fine, but that is a good point that because we are 2 or 3 months out, but the process of figuring out where we need to update, what needs to change, all that takes a little bit of just research time, which no one likes to sit down and do for 8 hours. So we'll do little bits over those 2 to 3 months. I'm pretty sure if anyone wants to help out, this is a great way to get involved, meet a bunch of the communities. I met Goblin through this. I know a bunch of people here. I just met Jim through this proposal, and it's just everyone is really fun. I've learned a lot from everyone. So just come involved, do some work with us, and we all share memes and have laughs for the most part. I don't know. Chocolate's kind of a grumpy guy, you know.
Why is he even here?
I'm not grumpy. I'm just enjoying my wine after a long day of trying to work with AMD GPUs. I was wondering, is it possible to have your coins offline but still stake? I think there's been some talk about that, but to have one of these hard wallets. Barton, I eat salad every single day. I exercise very often. Okay, I'm a very healty person.
I'm leaving this in the edit.
Want to have some wine? You can edit this out. Yes, I eat plenty of cucumbers and/or zucchinis. Is it possible to have your coins in a hard wallet? But yeah, go ahead.
What you're describing is called cold staking. It is not developed yet, but there are several communities working on it, and we aren't one of the communities developing it, but we would probably port it over once another community develops it, because it's a great idea. Being able to keep your coins safe in a cold wallet and still have them stake. My understanding is it splits. I'm going to butcher it, not even going to try, but there's a process behind it that involves 2 addresses for the coins, and they're never actually on the network. But short answer, not yet, but it's coming. Who knows when?
Yeah, I bring it up because it seems like, you know, when we talk about whales or even people who aren't whales, I mean, if you have, let's say, you know, a large amount, let's say, I don't know, like 100,000, like a decent amount, 100,000 Gridcoin, right? Right now that's worth like, you know, 4.5 grand. You know, at the height it was worth like 20 grand. Do you really want that? I mean, we talk about network security all the time. Do you really want that just lying around, you know, exposed to, you know, anything, the elements? I don't know. What if your computer's outside and get rains on or something? You know, I mean, that's like, yeah, like, I mean, that's obviously ridiculous, but you know, there's just like a lot of risk, and you know, I mean, how can we have you know, at what point isn't there a bottleneck where, you know, we're not going to be able to use this as a currency to some extent because of this security issue?
Absolutely. And that's why it's being developed, because that is a concern with most proof of stake currencies, and that you, with proof of work, you keep your coins in a separate wallet and then you connect to the network with your hardware. With proof of stake, you have to have your coins on the network to secure it. And even just like, I've been in proof of stake for years in various currencies, and just not remembering if I ticked or unticked the box that said for staking only still drives me crazy. And it's always default ticked, but I still am paranoid about, oh shoot, maybe I accidentally unticked it when I unlocked my wallet. It's like, so it's that sort of security, ease of mind thing that needs to get developed. I think you're absolutely right.
Now that would also, to an extent, solve some of these incentive problems with the staking. You know, it'd be a lot easier to stake if, you know, you weren't worried about, you know, security.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond just the, you know, practical, you know, everyday use.
We're approaching an hour here. Does anyone have? We spent most of the time on CBR, but does anyone have anything to say about just general the economics of Gridcoin, how incentives work, and the network itself, or any final questions on CBR?
So I was looking at the old polls, and so the most popular option, it seems, was to on the last one about CBR, excluding the current one, the most popular choice. Wait, let me just take a look real quick again. Yeah, with 90% in favor, the most popular one was CBR, but with, you know, more long-term solutions. So what, I mean, are there any more long-term solutions on the table? Does anybody have an idea? Is that being talked about?
So that poll was the 2018 roadmap poll titled Solving the Stake Weight Problem. And the stake weight problem is what we were discussing earlier about having a net weight of 0.3, just not good. So CBR is the immediate solution to bring more coins onto the network to increase the difficulty. Are there any more long-term solutions? I think the only other long-term solution, well, okay, there are a couple. We talked about something called dynamic block reward, which is a little more economics oriented, where you take into account inflation rates and the requirements of the network at a given time. So the, for example, the stake, if we need more people on the network to secure it, because the difficulty has gone down a lot, then the block reward would increase. So it's incentivizing people to get back on the network. If we have a huge difficulty, why not reduce the stake reward and increase research reward, which would then bring more crunching into science and maybe increase adoption rate. And when you increase adoption rate, you increase the adoption rate short term, but long term, you're actually increasing the security of the network, because everyone who comes in and crunches gets Gridcoin and then goes and starts staking with those Gridcoin. So you're securing the network that way. So that's one. There's also the idea of demurrage, where I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but you could use, it's basically the idea that you can continue to use the percent APR, but you would reward coins that have been trying to stake for a long time but haven't staked, or punish coins that have not been trying to stake for the long time and just come on to stake. So a large wallet has been offline, and then it comes on just to get its 1.5% interest, but because it's been offline for so long, it actually only ends up getting 0.15% interest, while a wallet that's been online trying to stake for days or months, but it's such a low balance it doesn't stake, instead of 1.5%, it actually gets 3% interest for being there for so long to help secure the network. So that one comes with other issues that are beyond just economics at the moment. We won't get into details, but there is another one called, oh, I just had it. Oh, duh. The main one, I think, is proof of research, because that is why we're here, using research to secure a blockchain. We just don't know how to do it yet. I think that is the main long-term solution, where we can somehow secure statistics to help secure the network. We tried it, and there were security flaws, so we had to take it out of the network, out of the protocol. But I do not think that I fully expect that we're going to continue researching that and trying to find a way to implement it, because whoever figures that out, that is an amazing technology for a protocol. So those are 3 examples right there that I can think of.
What was the problem? Well, how was the proof of research implemented, and what was the security flaw?
The main security flaw was that the way it was implemented was you use magnitude to increase your probability to stake. So if I have 100 magnitude, it increases. It's like holding 1,000 Gridcoin or something like that in terms of like how the staking protocol sees it. The security flaw is that you are using statistics from a non-secured platform to secure a cryptographic ledger, which just is not secure. So if you found out a way to cheat a Boink project, you can increase your magnitude, and then you can end up owning the blockchain. So because we do not control the security of Boink, that is just in principle insecure.
Well, that seems like a problem we have right now. I mean, if somebody was able to exploit a Boink project, they could change their magnitude to some extent. Where I mean, if you have 600 something coin weight for every unit of magnitude you have, and somehow you manage to get 10,000 magnitude. Okay, well suddenly you have 6 million coin weight. It wouldn't Barton, so it wouldn't damage the chain. The proof of yeah, Barton, can you explain that? So how does the proof of research damage the chain?
So by weighting proof of research against your stake, you, as Jay Ringo said, open up to manipulation, which would then allow massive attacks on the chain. You're looking at things like 51% attacks, double spend attacks, the worst nightmares for a blockchain. By removing the magnitude effect, it's pure proof of stake. In pure proof of stake, it's very resilient to 51% attacks because you have to literally control 51% of the funds, which is, if you have that much money, it's not in your monetary incentive to want to destroy the money you have, right? So the idea is, by using pure proof of stake without the proof of research tacked on and adding a vulnerability, you have a much more secure system that's a lot harder to exploit.
The main principle there is that the blockchain is the thing that we need to exist. So you're right, you can fake Boink projects and you can increase your magnitude, and people have done that. They've cheated Boink projects, and we usually catch them very quickly, and we contact the admins and we say something's going on, and it gets fixed. But in the meanwhile, you can fake your magnitude, and the worst things you can do right now are fake vote on a poll or receive some extra Gridcoin. But you cannot destroy the blockchain, and we are a blockchain. Above all else, we are a blockchain. So that's why you can't have proof of research. If we made it so magnitude helped you manipulate the blockchain, then the worst thing you could do was literally destroy the blockchain. And if you destroy the blockchain, there's no incentive for research and there's no Gridcoin.
So I'm wondering now. I mean, Django, it's up to you if you want to end the podcast, and then we could talk about this after. But I do have some ideas. I mean, I'm sure they've been thrown around before, but I'm wondering why they wouldn't work.
We'll throw them after, just because we are running out of time here. So I am going to wrap it up. I really suggest everyone here joins us during the Hangout on Saturday. That's in 2 days at 7 p.m. UTC, right here in the Gridcoin Discord server, one channel up from the Fireside. We will be undoubtedly continuing the CBR discussion. There will also be other discussions on other subjects. I think marketing is one. The white paper poll is wrapping up. We'll be discussing that. So do come and join that discussion.
And testnet. If you're interested in hearing about testnet, Barton's going to give us a full hour of nonstop talking.
That is next week. That is next week here on the Fireside. The Hangout is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the Hangout. Yeah.
Yeah, the Hangout Saturday, and then next week here on the Fireside, we'll have Barton here, and he'll be talking about testnet, which you heard a little bit about tonight. But it is the thing that helps us test the developments, and Barton is the testnet coordinator. He helps test the development. It's very important to any blockchain that you have a testnet, because we are dealing with protocols that need to get tested before they get implemented. So I guess that is it for the Fireside this week. Thank you all for joining. You can find the CBR proposal on Steemit, Reddit, and inside the Gridcoin client. Please don't forget to vote. If you have questions, reach out to anyone in the Discord or the Slack, and we'll be more than happy to help you and answer questions. And we'll see you, if not at the Hangout, then we'll see you next week. Good night.